Hi all, there was an absolutely epic encounter yesterday between Leela Zero and Deus X, as in Deus Ex Machina. So Deus Ex Machina had written some statements about being powered basically by Leela. There's some other statements, I'll give you a link to that in the description of the video. So there's a fierce kind of rivalry as well in this competition. To be promoted to the Vision 3. So this is like a crunch game. So we've got Leela Zero, Deus X and Wasp fiercely competing at the start of this round. So this is a key encounter. Leela playing white. So this is in round 19. E4, C5, Knight F3, Knight C6. This is the 4-ply book given to both of them. And Leela actually chooses Bishop B5. This is kind of anti-Sveshnikov system. I used to call it that. So this is quite annoying instead of the open Sicilian with D4 here. So we have E6 being played by Deus X, and Leela captures on C6. I think not capturing, for example, like this, I think it will be okay for black. For example, this position doesn't have too much to worry about. So E6, so taking on C6. B takes, and the spirit of the position I think here from a white perspective is to try and keep this bishop locked in like a prisoner on C8. The prison has to be strong, I believe, for this C8 bishop. The dark square play has to be good here for white. Sometimes C5 can be a target, E5 can be overprotected sometimes. You can often get locked down on C4, so target say C5 via Bishop A3 or Queen coming later to C3. That could be an Achilles heel as well. But one of the major aspects, I believe, is the C8 bishop in this position from a white perspective. We have D3, D5, B3, not minding the possibility of exchanging queens. That will just wreck black's pawn structure anyway to take here. So we have Knight E7, Bishop B2, Queen C7, Knight BD2. So yes, I was rooting for Leela, and it seemed as though Leela's evaluation at this point was very positive. We have H5. Black's got quite a few problems to solve in this position. Queen E2, Knight G6. White castles queenside, Knight F4, the queen goes back. Knight G6, and yep, a repetition here. And I'll change Queen E1. We have Rook B8, G3 keeping the knight out of F4, Rook B4, annoying, but now white can play Queen E2 without being harassed by Knight F4, A5, A3 kicking the Rook, and A4 fixing against A4 from black, which might be a nuisance. So far so good in the position. This bishop doesn't seem that great at the moment. For example, F6 is played. E5, Bishop E7, Rook HG1, F5, and now here after Knight H4, I thought this is very interesting for black. It's like there's a disconnection in black's position between queenside and kingside, and this is kind of demonstrative. Black did play Knight takes H4, for example. This position, for example here, with Bishop A3, you can see the strategy mentioned, the C8 bishop and the dark squares. It seems to be in white's favour. Lock down on against G5 first though, and then torture C5. This is the approach which, heading for A5 and Queen C3, for example like this, that hits the bishop on A3. So let's say this is still in line with locking down the bishop on C8. So as long as the philosophy of the positions there, this kind of dynamic continuation is very nice for white. As an example, illustrative continuation, where white should be a lot better. You can see that this bishop's still a problem piece. White's kind of dominating on the dark squares. That's in the philosophy of the position, as an example. Now you might think also Bishop takes H4 is worth considering. It's hitting the knight though now, the rook, and this is dangerous after F4 for black. Knight not easily being able to go back. Say Queen F2 there, Rook G5, white's got a lot of pressure on the G file. This position is very, very dangerous for black. After queen takes c5, this is just horrible for black. Where's the knight going? Rook g7's crashing through. It's just horrible. White has a big advantage. If rook h6 here, taking on c6, taking here and then bang, rook takes g6. It's just hopeless. There's also possibilities of bishop a3 check here, which are really nasty. Black would have to, I don't know, give up the exchange or stuff like that, or even queen takes a5 here. It's a disaster. So, in a nutshell, here this seems justified in both cases. So black played wisely knight f8. Now, intuitively, when looking at the game, thought f4 was a decent idea in this position. And I'm not sure why it would be so bad. After, say, takes, white can get the G file. This is just an example. It seems very pleasant for white here. Let's say queen b6. Yeah, this continuation. It seems pleasant enough. One key aspect is, okay, this bishop, it might wriggle like this. This is like a French defense maneuver. But fundamentally, with this pawn chain, it's a prison for the c8 bishop here. So I think white has an advantage. So f4 I thought was very interesting to consider. Let's have a look, just a moment, something else here. Bishop. So there's knight f3, maybe bishop a3. Have a look at this. This position, it seems as though white's fine here as well. So f4 I assumed was okay. But Leela plays h3. This is a bit of a weird, I thought a bit of a strange plan. We have now g5, so black's being allowed g5, and this rook's getting a bit active in this line. After rook h7 here, we have now, again, this seems to be an interesting prospect for playing f4 in this position. I don't know why f4 would be so bad necessarily. To give you some examples, if g4, then taking rook h1, as long as this c8 bishop is bad, I would say that white's got the better prospects here. Small edge. So that didn't seem so bad. If we go back here, so g4 was played. So if f4, if this is just a disaster, really, I think this is even worse because h5 is so weak here. So white's got a possibility of fixing h5. It's just looking like a nice edge. Look at that bishop. But in the game we have g4. This starts to get a bit weird. Black took on g4, now creates an outside pass pawn, but has also got the possibility of knight g6 to f4. So this doesn't seem too healthy, but not only that, there's also h3 and rook h4 potentially. So this knight can be kicked away from protecting f4, and there's a ready-made knight g6 to f4, which I remember in some French defense lines learning from Watson's book on dangerous weapons in the French. It is like this generally in the French. If you look, that is an Achilles heel, the f4 square of white's position. So rook h1, rook b4, c4, which is a big concession actually for b3. It ties down the knight. You might think, well, so what? Well, if the knight's tied down, anytime white wants to play knight f3, b3 could be weaker. So bear that in mind. In the variations now, this is a backward pawn liability on b3, which holds white's position accountable and in balance to do anything more adventurous. b3 becomes a major issue here. So yeah, there's pressure from the queen side against g4 as well here, and it might even support knight g6 to f4. So this c4 is a definite concession. And then we have h3, which weakens a bit f4. Now knight g6, which is going into f4, entrenching a knight into f4. Things seem to be not going too well here. Knight f1, knight f4, queen f3. On queen e3, Rook h4, black seems to have a small edge here, a lot of pressure. So, and okay, so queen f3, rook h4, yeah, black seems to have a certain amount of activity here, which is annoying. Knight g3, and now h2, which kind of gives black the h3 square as well to play with. So if ever the knight moves, there's rook h3 to factor in, and there's also a d3 liability. The background as well, this bishop might be able to one day reroute to g6. That would hit d3 hard as well. We have king c2, rook b8. Now knight h5 is played. Things get really interesting here. Black plays rook h3. Now, if white meekly goes back because the queen hasn't got any squares, then this isn't very good at all. The queen hasn't got g2, the queen hasn't got e2, the queen hasn't got any squares. But if we go back, we can see that this bishop is given extra time to come alive. For example, like this, with king d8, bishop e8, bishop g6, and target, tied down to b3, active rook, active knight. Black's just better. White's just crumbling here. For example, this is a continuation. White is just on the way to total disaster, as an example. So this is bleak now, but in this bleakness comes something absolutely fascinating, science fiction, out of necessity, basically, because otherwise this bishop's just heading for g6. So, yes, I hope you can guess what did white play here if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. If it's not knight g3, there's not too many other alternatives. Okay, it's the queen sack. So for a rook, for a pawn. Now here's critical, knight f4, how to follow up here. I was asked several times by several people in the stream last night, you know, about queen sacrifices in general, you know, being brilliant. Is it brilliant or what? It really depends on the follow-up. A lot of things in chess depend on the follow-up. We can all play the opening like a super GM, like Kasparov, but it's the follow-up. Now here, what is the follow-up? Now, I've got a reasonably powerful machine here. I can do a little bit of research on quick analysis. On my quick analysis, this the disclaimer here, it seems in this position, and this agrees with my philosophy of the whole position, the c8 bishop, trying to keep it in the prison of the pawn structure as long as possible. From a philosophical point of view as well as a technical point of view, there's alignment in agreement by playing a certain move here, which is not what was played. What was played was knight takes f4. It seems knight f6 check might be the way to go here. And the reason is to keep the c8, for me, to keep the c8 bishop bottled up. So have a look at the detailed analysis in the pinned comments. I'll give you the interactive PGN in my pinned comment of this video. I've done a lot of analysis here for this position. Let's check now. Say bishop takes f6, because if king d8, then this is a disaster for black. So we can rule that out. That's just getting mated, for example. So say this is forced. E takes. Although the rooks are looking loose, this is not that bad. Knight g6, so hitting the rook. Rook h6. And it seems here this is a really dangerous position. It seems here that, this is my conclusion, if black doesn't play queen f7, which seems to be a dynamic equality, then black gets in big trouble. So I'll give you examples here. If the knight went back, then check, and we're winning the queen. So let's say the knight goes to f8, which protects against rook h7. Let's say this position is forced. White has a positional plan here to keep the c8 bishop out of the game. Basically, to lock down the e5 point with rook e1, lock down e5, and that locks down e6, which locks down the bishop. If the bishop hasn't got liberation, then this should be good. Now, this is some evidence for that idea. Rook E1. Okay, let's say bishop A6, which is ridiculous, but bishop E5. Black's in lockdown, but is locking down the knight to B3. But here, white has a big advantage. For example, well, there are examples in the variations. White does seem to be much better here. Now let's imagine instead of bishop A6 in this position, rook B7. So bishop E5, we see in full flow this idea of locking down the bishop. This position, what does black actually do? Let's say queen B4, this position, and white gets adventurous with rook H8. It seems black's losing here. For example, queen A3, let's rule out queen A3. This line is just losing the queen, so that's ridiculous. So say D4 to play queen C3 check. It seems more sensible. This variation, which looks dangerous, but if you look at the C8 bishop's out of the game at the moment. Queen kicked back, and after knight E4, threatening knight D6 check, the dark squares are very vulnerable. And we have a position where black gets in a kind of positional zugzwang, essentially here. Based on this bishop, just total prisoner in the pawn structure, and G5 now loose. So say this position is a disaster. That's a disastrous ending for black. If black doesn't do anything radical, well, black's in big trouble here because of rook takes G5 and rook G7. So yeah, let's go back. Rook E1 instead of bishop E6. Let's look at E5 to try and open up the bishop. Bishop takes and taking the rook. Check. That's a disaster. So yeah, it looks as though this queen F7 is necessary to be able to hold a dynamic equality. The problem is here, well, white can't push for a win. It seems, from my analysis anyway, it seems white can't push for a win. If knight F3, simply the queen goes back against the backward pawn. This is what I was mentioning earlier. This is white being tied down to B3 here, this backward pawn. It just basically black could repeat. So this seems to be at least good enough for a draw. The concept here seems to be good enough for a draw. It seems very difficult for black to unravel the C8 bishop in these lines. So check the detailed analysis PGN if you want some evidence on that. But in the game, unfortunately, knight takes F4, which seems it's really exciting. Anyway, I mean, I was watching TV. I wasn't planning on going upstairs and checking the computer, switching the computer on and the temperature yesterday. I wasn't planning on doing that. But then there was a Twitch alert, Kingscrusher, Queen sec. I have to rush upstairs and start analysing in the sweltering heat. What's going on here? Is this to do with the G pawn, the rook on the 7th? Okay, so rook on the 7th pins the bishop. Queen D8 was played. It seems this is a good move to unpin. If King D7, black's just going to get in big trouble. For example, here, bishop A3 is nasty. That pin is too much. It's too much for black to bear this kind of situation. I'll just get a massive advantage. So Queen 8, strong move to unpin. We have G5, and now bishop F8. If bishop takes G5, then there's no bishop F8. So check kind of wins the queen with advantage. So so G5, bishop F8. Now queen takes G5, looks on, so that's protected as well for G6, G7. Unfortunately, after rook B7, black seems to be just defending. The soundness of the queen sacrifice is starting to be, well, on trial. Rook D7, G6, Queen G7 stopping the pawn. from advancing. The rook goes back, king d8, and unfortunately this does spell bishop d7 to e8 later, king d8. So that bishop, which should have been in prison, now is improving, the prospects are improving on that bishop. It's actually, and even white attends to this pawn now with the king. I'm not sure there was any point taking on a5 here. It was on offer, but I don't think there's any point there. There's a big problem with g6. So we have knight g1, and it would be nice, I guess, if knight had knight h3 to taking f4, but rook f7 tactical, exploiting the pin. We have rook h1, rook goes back, testing, rook c7 now, rook h5, rook f7 testing, repeating. Here, after knight f3, bishop g7, firmly blockading the g pawn, and there doesn't seem to be any problem for black really. Black's going to get bishop e8 in classic French defense. Bad bishop maneuver here in this structure. So black's just maneuvering for that. And now here, it's just horrible. After knight h4, this allows black the forcing bishop e7, just taking on h4 and taking on g6 rather safely. So we have this position where after b takes, the game ended here. An example continuation, d takes, here queen h7, rook g8, getting ready for, just simplifying, for example, with bishop f7 is enough. The queen is very strong, can actually come in like this as an example and do a lot of damage with the pawn. Yeah, I was gutted yesterday because I thought basically also Leela's chances of promotion dropped. The next two games would be critical, which I'm going to be covering next, to see if promotion prospects were still on the cards. So around this, there's at this time there's like controversy as well if the Deus X engine is original enough, etc. Statement from the key developers that perhaps the entry shouldn't have been allowed. Okay, the timing also yeah, I don't know, is not ideal. But everyone's kind of upset basically, as though on the Leela side, as though the prospect's totally squashed by Leela's own hands, an engine powered by Leela, at least by the statements made by the Deus X author, in inverted commas. So yeah, a lot of pain. I never cared so much about any chess engine in this competition in the last, like, I don't know how many years. This channel has historically covered TCEC games from many years back, but I've never actually cared so much about something being promoted or not from Division 4. So it reminds me maybe a bit of Alexa when it lost internet connection the first night. Me and my friends were very sad to hear Alexa like almost dying in the background. Oh, I haven't got any internet. I'm losing power or something. It was very sad. It was that sort of feeling after this game that oh dear. But anyway, life moves on. It was brilliant, but it seems on my analysis only good enough for a draw. As long as the spirit of the c8 bishop, locking that in, is adhered to. But once that bishop's allowed to crawl back into the game with the classic French defense maneuver, in my view, black's going to be having a great time. With the c4 move, there was always the backward pawn liability, and also the d3 pawn target, making the whole manoeuvre for bishop g6 a lot more dangerous. The whole queen sack seemed to be forced. If the knight did retreat, as I say, the bishop would come to g6 and torture d3, as well as b3 being a liability. So it seemed to be a very downward trend to the position if the queen sack wasn't played in any case. So I think the problems stem from earlier, from playing g4, weakening f4. f4, keeping the position more closed, keeping the c8 bishop more of a prisoner, seemed to be more in line with the position. So I think the whole g4 plan seemed a little bit suspect to me. Interesting. But Leela's evolving all the time, so okay. Put it down to experience. On that note, comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.